Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be doing another casting video. In this video, I'll be casting Survivor Rivals, which is essentially a blood versus water style cast, where the blood versus water pairs are actually rivals from previous seasons of Survivor. I think this is a fun idea. I think this is something that is actually feasible, something that production could put together if they really wanted to. And I actually really like the cast I did end up putting together. I think this would be a really fun cast in reality. But I will say that the way I put this cast together was kind of similar to how I would put together an Amazing Race season, or really how I put together my last blood versus water video, where I wanted there to be 3 male-male groups, 3 female-female groups, and 4 male-female groups, kind of to keep the genders equal. I also want all these rivalries to actually be within the show. I'm not going to be casting people that have rivalries from outside of the show. I feel like that kind of ruins the theme of the season. I want this to be more contained within the history of the series. So obviously we'll be going through the contenders season by season, just like I do with any other cast. However, when it comes to the actual rivalries, I'll be talking about the rivalries that happen within each season, not where the players originally played on the original season, as obviously that doesn't really make much sense here. So let's start off with Survivor Borneo, where Survivor Borneo, the only ones I considered was Kelly and Sue, obviously a very iconic rivalry, but I feel like neither are really super likely to return in the future, so I didn't put either of them on the cast. From Australian Outback, I considered Alicia and Kimmy, again another pretty iconic rivalry, but I don't think Alicia wants to come back, and I don't know how likely a Kimmy return is at this point either. But also there are a lot of rivalries with Jerry, and we had Tina and Jerry, we have Keith and Jerry, but I think the most iconic of the bunch, and the one that I did put on the cast, was Colby and Jerry. I feel like, how do you not have them on a Survival Rivals cast? Like, obviously they're not really rivals anymore, they get along in real life now, they're not in the position that they were in Australia Outback or in All Stars, but I feel like, how could you have a rival season without them? I think they had to make the cast. Survivor Africa, there were a couple I considered, like Tom and Clarence and Frank and Brandon. I just feel like those pairs, like, I just don't feel like they're likely to return, but the one I did consider pretty likely out of this bunch, and another one that I put on the cast, again, I didn't put many older school rivalries on the cast because, again, they're not super likely to return, but I felt like this one was at least kind of likely, or at least possible, I should say, and that is Lex and Kelly Goldsmith. Now, Kelly Goldsmith is someone that has been in the running to return in more recent seasons. I do think she is someone that could return for like a second chance too or something, so why not put her on the Rivals cast? I feel like Lex is someone that isn't super likely to return at this point, but considering the theme, I felt like they were obviously pretty big rivals on that season, with Lex thinking that Kelly Goldsmith was the one that voted against him when it wasn't true, him actively targeting her because of that. I thought that was a really fun dynamic there. It'll be fun to see them on another season together. From season 4, there were a couple rivalries. None of them I really put on the cast. I mean, Sean and John would have been fun. Giuseppe and Kathy would have been fun, but again, none of them really made the cut. Same thing with Thailand, didn't put any of them on. The only one I really even considered was Shannon and Rob, but again, that's not happening. From season 6, the only ones I considered was Rob Cesternino and Jenna Maraska, but again, I don't feel like it's super likely, so I didn't put them on. From the Pearl Islands, I considered Sandra and Johnny Fairplay. That would have been a lot of fun, but I feel like Sandra's probably done with Survivor at this point, and also Johnny Fairplay has a terrible relationship with production, so don't think that's super likely. But it would have been fun to also see Johnny Fairplay and Rupert. I think that would have been also a really fun dynamic, but again, not going to happen. I also considered Savage and Lil because it just would have been funny, but again, not going to happen. From All Stars, I considered Rob and Lex, and also Rob and Tom. I just feel like Boston Rob should be done with Survivor at this point, so that's why I went with Lex and Kelly over Rob and Lex here. Though again, I mean, Rob and Lex is obviously probably a more iconic rivalry, but again, I just don't feel like it's super likely to get both of them. From Vanuatu, one I really wanted to put on the cast, I was so close to putting on the cast, I almost put Twyla and Eliza. And again, that was a great rivalry on that season where they just hid their cuts the entire way through, but they simply just didn't make the cut. I mean, I do think there is a chance that they could make the cast. I mean, obviously Eliza is someone that was just on The Amazing Race. I think she's someone that's at least within production's radar of people to bring back. And I think Twyla is someone that they wanted to bring back closer to her season. I think as of Blood vs. Water 1, she was still in the casting pool. I don't know where she is now, but I think they would at least be a consideration. From Palau, the only one I really considered was Tom and Kobe. But again, I don't think Tom Westman's ever playing Survivor again, so had to pass on that. From Guatemala, I considered Judd and Margaret because it would just be funny. I mean, I love Judd as a character. I haven't been able to talk about Judd as much as I would like to on this channel, but I love Judd as a character. But I just feel like his return is so unlikely, and especially Margaret. It's like the only reason Margaret's even memorable is because of her confrontation with Judd. But also, I considered Jamie and Bobby John, with both of them actually being in the running, I believe, during Blood vs. Water. But then almost everyone was in the running for Blood vs. Water. And even then, like, it's already been, like, almost 7 years since Blood vs. Water casting anyway. So it's been a while. Again, just not super likely. Now from Survivor Panama, and there were a couple I considered, Shane and Courtney, but I don't think either of them are super likely returnees at this point. Obviously, the biggest rivalry of the season was Aris and Terry. I think the problem with that is that I don't think Aris wants to play again. I would be very surprised to see Aris on Survivor again. But I do think Terry Dietz is somewhat likely of a returnee, and he's someone that I personally would really like to see back. So I decided to put him on with someone else that I think production is willing to bring back, and that is Danielle DiLorenzo. I think out of the rivals I have on this cast, they're probably the least rivalry on the cast. Like, they definitely aren't really rivals, I will fully admit that. But I mean, Danielle did vote out Terry after Terry saved her at the final 4, and it's because of this move that they decided to put her on the villains tribe in Heroes vs. Villains. So I'm like, why not make them rivals? Who cares? And also, I just feel like Danielle DiLorenzo was supposedly in the running for Edge of Extinction. I think she's someone that I could see being brought back under the right circumstances, and pairing her up with Terry, I think that is a circumstance that I could see them bring them back for. So because of that, I put them on the cast. Now we actually have a pretty long stretch without anyone making the cast. It's actually not until Survivor Cambodia that we have another pair making the cast, though obviously there are a lot of considerations here, so let's just run through them. From Cook Islands, I considered a lot of people with Penner, but I just feel like Penner isn't a super likely returnee right now. So those didn't make the cut. Yul and Ozzy would have been a lot of fun. Again, just not super likely in my eyes. From Peih-Gee, obviously we have Dreams and Yao Man. Again, I just feel like neither of them are super likely returnees at this point. Sandra and Lacey would have been funny, but again, never happening. And then Rocky and Anthony would have been interesting. I mean, I don't know if it would have been fun, but it would have been interesting to see, though. Again, just not likely at all at this point. From Survivor China, obviously there's a lot of rivalries with Jean Robert. I don't think Jean Robert is ever returning at this point, so didn't put him on. From Micronesia, I mean, there's Parvati and Eliza. I think that would have been fun. I mean, I just don't really see what Parvati has to give to Survivor at this point. And also, I just don't really see it being super likely that she will return again, especially for a all-star season of this low magnitude at this point. Like, again, Survivor Rivals is kind of a throwaway theme. I feel like if Parvati would return for a future season, it would have to be like a legend sort of season, like a major season. For Rivals, I just feel like it's kind of beneath her at this point. Again, Penner and Suri would have been fun, but again, I don't think Penner is returning at this point. And then also Joel and Chet would have been funny, but again, never happening. From Gabon, I considered Bob and Randy, but Bob's never playing Survivor, and neither's Randy. So, I mean, again, they didn't make the cut. And then Corinne and Sugar would have been interesting, though. I don't think Sugar is someone that production has any consideration of ever bringing back due to what happened to her on Heroes vs. Villains. From Tocantins, I mean, there's a lot of rivalries with Coach. I mean, Coach and Aaron, Coach and Sierra, Coach and Brennan. I mean, I think there's a lot there that would have been fun, but didn't make the cut. And then Sierra and Tyson's also another one that you can consider, but again, none of them made the cut. From Samoa, the only real pair there that I considered was Russell Hansen and Laura Moret, though again, Russell Hansen's never playing Survivor US ever again, so didn't put him on. Same thing goes with some of his rivalries from Heroes vs. Villains with him and Rupert, him and Boston Rob, him and Sandra. None of them really made the cut because of that as well. From Nicaragua, I did consider Nyanka and Kelly B. I think that would have been a funny pair. But also, one that I really considered was Marty and Jane. I think that was one that almost made the cut. I think for me, the thing that made me cut them was the fact that both of them are getting up there in age. I mean, Marty is nearing 60. I believe Jane is nearing 70. So because of that, I just felt like it was kind of tough to fit them in the cast when I felt like there were more likely returnees. From Redemption Island, I mean, I did consider Philip and Steve. I think Steve is someone that I actually wouldn't mind a return from. I actually think Steve Wright was a decent player of Survivor, but it's never happening. From South Pacific, I think Jim Rice and Cochran would be funny. It's just, again, Cochran's never playing Survivor again. From One World, the only one I considered was Kim and Troyzan. I think that's a pretty major one, but again, I just don't think it's likely. From Philippines, I considered Abby with RC. And to be honest, they're a pretty major pair there. And I think the problem there is that RC is just so blatantly against playing with Abi that I don't think this is ever happening. I mean, she turned down Cambodia because she heard that Abi was in the running. I mean, I think that's a major sign that we're never going to see Abi and RC on the same season ever again. Good thing is that there's another rivalry with Abi that is more likely to return that I put on the cast that we'll talk about later. And Penner I considered with Jeff Kent. I think that would have been really fun, especially because Penner seems to actually hate Jeff Kent in real life. I think that would be a really fun dynamic to see on the show. But again, Penner not super likely to return at this point, and also Jeff Kent seeming to not wanting to play again. It just didn't really fit on the cast. Karen Moen, the only real consideration there was Corinne and Philip, but they simply just didn't make the cut. Obviously, Dawn and Brenda is one that I at least thought of, but again, I just feel like it's kind of an icky situation there. From Blood versus Water, we had a few rivalries, like Vetus and Laura Moret that I considered, didn't put them on. Considered Tyson and Jervis with Aris. Again, I don't think Aris is a likely returnee, but I did also have a lot of considerations with Brad Culpepper, especially Brad Culpepper and Cody's. I think that would have been a lot of fun, but I think Brad Culpepper has another rival that I think is a more likely returnee at this point, so we'll talk about that a bit later. From Karen Moen, there's a lot of possibilities here with like Tony and LJ, Tony and Spencer, Cass and Spencer, Cass and Sarah. I just feel like all those pairs aren't super likely at this point, with people within those pairs not wanting to return again. From San Juan del Sur, I considered Natalie and John Mish. That would have been fun. Missy and Reed is one. John and Jeremy. Jeremy and Josh. I think out of those pairs, Jeremy and Josh is the one that I would personally like to see back the most, though, again, Jeremy's probably never playing Survivor again, so I don't think it's super likely. Worlds Apart, I did consider a couple rivalries, like Mike and Rodney and Mike and Joe. I think those would have been interesting, though, again, just simply didn't make the cut. But now we're finally back at a season where I did put someone on the cast. From Survivor Cambodia, there were a couple considerations that didn't make the cut, like Sierra and Savage, Cass and Savage. I think those are fun pairs. Abby and Wu would have been a lot of fun, but the one I did end up putting on the cast was, as I said earlier, Abi-Maria, but I paired her up with Peih-Gee. I don't know how likely of a returnee Peih-Gee is at this point. I think it's pretty low, to be honest, but I would love to see Peih-Gee back again. I feel like for a rival season, I feel like she's the biggest rival that you can get back, along with Abi-Maria, especially because they seem to get along in real life as well. It's not like there's actual hatred there. It's not like Abi and RC, where they just seem to genuinely not like each other in real life. I think Abi and Peih-Gee would be a fun pair to bring back to a season of Survivor. So because of that, I put them on my cast. Now, I didn't put anyone from Survivor Co. wrong, though again, there were some considerations like Ty and Scott. I mean, we had Sydney and Jason, Michelle and Nick, Michelle and Aubrey, Aubrey and Debbie, but again, like none of them really made the cut, though Aubrey and Debbie was probably the one I considered the most. Though again, I'm not sure how much Aubrey is even willing to consider a return to Survivor at this point. From Millennials vs. Gen X, I did put one pair on the cast. I did consider David and Zeke. I think the problem is that both of them have reasons to not return at this point. Adam and Taylor would have been interesting, though the one I did put on was obviously Adam and Jay. I think Adam showed on Winners at War that he's the fun character. He's someone that I would like to see back on Survivor again. And to see him with Jay, again, that was a rivalry on the show. And also Jay's just a fun character as well, and someone that hasn't been back for Survivor yet, surprisingly. So I think to have them two on the cast, I think it would be a lot of fun. Now from Game Changers, we have Sandra and Tony, which would have been fun, but we kind of already saw that on Winners at War, and also I don't think they're likely returnees anyway. Brad and Debbie was a consideration, but the one I did put on the cast was Brad and Ty. Again, I think Ty is still a somewhat likely returnee at some point down the road, and Brad Culpepper is someone that has so many rivalries. It's like, how do you not put him on Survival Rivals? So putting him on with Ty just made the most sense for me. From HHH, there were actually a lot of considerations. I actually forgot just how many rivalries there really were on the show. I considered Joe and Alan. I would like to see both of them back. They just simply didn't make the cut. Ryan and Allie was a consideration, but outside of that, there was just a lot of rivalries with Ben, and a lot of that having to do with obviously his position in the game, but I mean, he had a rivalry with Cole, with Joe, with Lauren, with Devin, but the one that I did put on the cast was Ben and Chrissy. And I think through this also adds in the Ben and Adam rivalry as well from Winners at War, which I thought was a lot of fun, so to have them both on this cast, I thought was a pretty good idea. Now, the reason I went with Ben and Chrissy over some of these other pairs, I feel like, I mean, obviously Chrissy is also a likely returnee. I needed a male-female pairing, and All the options that I had, I felt like Ben and Chrissy was the best option. Because I do think like a Ben and Devin return and Ben and Joe return could have been interesting. But I feel like Ben and Chrissy is the best option for a male-female pair. And to be honest, even just a pair in general, I feel like that's probably the duo that would have the most fun dynamic on a return. Now from Ghost Island, the only pair I considered was the one that made the cast. I feel like this was such a lock. I mean, when creating the idea for this video, this was the one that I knew for sure was going to be on the cast. And that was Dominic Abate and Chris Noble. I mean, I think there's no way you can not have them on the cast. They had a really fun rivalry on their season. They're both really great characters. Dominic is one of the best players to never win the game. I think there's no reason to not have them on this season. I think they were pretty big locks for me. David vs. Goliath, I considered a few pairs. I considered Mike and Christian. They didn't make the cut. I considered Elizabeth and Carl. But the one that did make the cut for me was Angelina and Natalie. And again, this is another one that wasn't really that big of a rivalry within the show. But I feel like they have that big moment, obviously, with Angelina asking for Natalie's jacket. I feel like is enough to warrant a return for both of them on a Rivals season. Why not? I mean, obviously Angelina, I mean, now that she's had her kid, maybe in a few years, I think she would be willing to play again. Natalie Cole is someone that is at least on production's radar to bring back, so why not? We'll bring them back. From Edge of Extinction, I didn't put anyone on the cast, though there were some considerations, like Kelly Wentworth and David, though I don't feel like either of them are super likely returnees at this point. And we got Chris and Rick Devens, which I actually considered. I mean, I felt like the male-male pairs, though, were pretty locked in for me. Again, Adam and Jay, Brad and Ty, Dominic and Chris. I felt like those were locks, so they didn't make the cut. Now from Eye of the Idols, I did put one pair on the cast. I did really consider Nora and Lauren. It really came down, like these two pairs were really, really close. It could be either of them on the cast. I considered Nora and Lauren. The reason I didn't put them on is because I felt like their rivalry was less prominent on the show. Because, I mean, to be honest, the rivalry was really only that final round in the game. Like that final round where Nora wins immunity and tells Lauren that she's going to put her to fire. I mean, I think that's really the bulk of their rivalry, while the other pair that I did put on the cast, being Missy and Karishma, I feel like their rivalry was more throughout the season. Now, I don't know how likely a Missy return is. Obviously, she did get some pretty negative feedback after the season, though I do think she's someone that production very clearly liked, and also Karishma is someone that I thought initially she wasn't willing to play again, though she has said in more recent interviews that she is willing to play again. So I decided, why not? We'll put them on the cast. And that's pretty much the entire cast. Obviously, we still have Winners at War to talk about. There wasn't really that many considerations from that season. Because, I mean, I've said this before, that I feel like Winners at War is kind of the ending point for a lot of these players. Like, while there are players like Ben and Adam that I think could return in the future, I feel like there's so many players from that season that I just don't see playing Survivor again. So because of that, I didn't really have many considerations here. There we go. That is my entire cast of Survivor Rivals. To run through things again, from the Australian Outback, I have Colby Donaldson and Jerry Manthe. From Survivor Africa, I have Lex Vandenberg and Kelly Goldsmith. From Survivor Panama, I have Danielle De Lorenzo and Terry Dietz. From Survivor Cambodia, I have Abi-Maria Gomez and Peih-Gee Law. From Survivor Millennials vs. Gen X, I have Adam Klein and Jay Starrett. From Survivor Game Changers, I have Brad Culpepper and Ty Trang. From Survivor HHH, I have Ben Driebergen and Chrissy Hoffbeck. From Survivor Ghost Island, I have Dominic Abate and Chris Noble. From Survivor David vs. Goliath, I have Angelina Keeley and Natalie Cole. And from Survivor Island of the Idols, I have Missy Bird and Rishma Patel. So that is my cast for Survivor Rivals. Again, I think this is a pretty fun cast. I think this is also a cast that they could put together if they wanted to. I feel like most of these people are very likely to return in a future season. So yeah, that's it for this latest casting video. I have been considering doing a different type of casting video in the future, where essentially it would be dream casting some of these casts I've already done, like dream casting Survivor Legends or dream casting Survivor Second Chance 2 or whatever, where I go through those casts that I made last time, but instead of doing it in a realistic fashion, because that's what I've been doing with these casting videos, I feel like some people don't seem to understand, is that with these casting videos I try to make a realistic cast, a cast that seems likely if production were to ever put this cast together. However, with this dream casting series, I want to make a cast of people that I personally want and talk about my opinions on those sort of people. And I think that would be a fun idea down the road. But for now, that's my cast for Survivor Rivals. Thank you for watching.